Imagine this. It's 2008, and the world is about to witness something truly extraordinary. A film that doesn't just entertain, it challenges, grips, and leaves you breathless long after the credits roll. Today, I'm taking you on a deep dive into why The Dark Knight is not just a must-watch movie, but one of the greatest cinematic achievements of all time. If you've never seen it, or even if you have a dozen times, stick around because this is the story of a film that redefined what superhero movies could be. Trust me, by the end, you'll be rushing to hit play. Picture Gotham City, not some cartoonish version, but a gritty, real-world metropolis drowning in corruption and crime. A city where hope is fading and one man stands as its shadowy guardian. That's Batman, brought to life once again by the incredible Christian Bale. But this time, the stakes are higher, the shadows deeper, and the threat unlike anything he's faced before. Directed by the visionary Christopher Nolan, who also co-wrote the screenplay with his brother Jonathan Nolan, and story contributions from David S. Goyer, this is the second chapter in Nolan's groundbreaking Dark Knight trilogy. It builds perfectly on Batman Begins from 2005, but it takes everything to a whole new level. Darker, more intense, more philosophical. Nolan didn't just make a sequel, he crafted a modern crime epic disguised as a superhero story. The budget? A massive $185 million, huge for the time, but every penny shows on screen. The film was produced by Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, Nolan's wife and frequent collaborator, and Nolan himself, with executive producers including Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull. Distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures, it became a co-production between the US and UK, blending Hollywood scale with Nolan's signature precision. Now, let's talk about the cast, because this ensemble is legendary. Christian Bale returns as Bruce Wayne/Batman, delivering a performance that's raw, brooding, and utterly committed. His Batman is no longer just learning his role. He's living with the weight of it, constantly questioning how far he'll go to protect his city. Then there's Heath Ledger as the Joker. Oh man, where do I even start? Ledger's portrayal is mesmerizing, chaotic, unpredictable, terrifying in the most human way. He secluded himself for months to get into character, keeping a diary filled with clippings, photos, and twisted notes. His voice, that mix of high-pitched menace and low growl, was inspired by everything from ventriloquists to punk icons like Johnny Rotten. Ledger's Joker isn't a cartoon villain. He's anarchy personified, a force that forces everyone around him to confront their own darkness. It's a performance that earned him a posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, along with a Golden Globe, BAFTA, and countless others. It's haunting, brilliant, and impossible to forget. Aaron Eckhart brings incredible depth as Harvey Dent, Gotham's White Knight District Attorney, charismatic, idealistic, and the symbol of hope through the legal system. Maggie Gyllenhaal steps in as Rachel Dawes, giving the role fresh energy and emotional complexity as someone caught between two very different men. Gary Oldman is rock solid as Lieutenant James Gordon, the honest cop who's Batman's uneasy ally, and the moral center of the story. Don't forget the supporting powerhouses. Michael Caine as the wise, heartfelt Alfred Pennyworth, always ready with that perfect mix of humor and tough love. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, the genius behind Batman's tech, and a host of memorable faces like Eric Roberts as mob boss Sal Maroni, Chin Han as the calculating Lau, Cillian Murphy reprising Scarecrow, and smaller but impactful roles from actors like Nestor Carbonell as the mayor, Monique Gabriella Kernan as a detective, and even cameos from folks like Senator Patrick Lee and musician Matt Skiba. The film runs for a tight, intense 152 minutes, 2 hours and 32 minutes that fly by, because every scene matters. Nolan and editor Lee Smith took an aggressive approach to pacing, cutting anything unnecessary before filming even started. No filler, just pure momentum. Visually, this movie is stunning. Cinematographer Wally Pfister shot much of it on location, turning Chicago into Gotham with its towering buildings, elevated trains, and sprawling streets. They filmed the famous opening bank heist in the old Chicago main post office, epic chases along Wacker Drive, and more. But here's what made it revolutionary. Nolan was the first director to shoot major sequences with IMAX cameras. About 28 minutes of the film, including those huge, immersive action set pieces. The format gives those moments a scale and detail that's breathtaking, especially on the big screen. Production designer Nathan Crowley created incredible practical sets, the Bat Bunker, mob hideouts, and more. Special effects supervisor Chris Corbould and his team prioritized real stunts over CGI whenever possible. That truck flip during the chase? Real. The hospital explosion? They actually blew up a condemned building. Visual effects houses like Double Negative handled around 700 shots, but minimally, Nolan wanted it grounded and real. The Batsuit got an upgrade, more flexible, armored with urethane for better movement. The Batpod, that wild motorcycle that deploys from the tumbler, was a practical beast, ridden by stunt experts after intense training. The Joker's makeup with those smeared scars took hours to apply, varying slightly scene to scene for realism, sweatier and messier during high-stress moments. And the music. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard delivered one of the all-time great scores. Zimmer's two-note Joker motif is pure dread, punk-inspired and electronic, while Howard's themes for Dent bring in warped brass as things darken. It's tense, emotional, unforgettable. Recorded at Air Studios, it perfectly amplifies every heartbeat of the story. Filming kicked off on April 18, 2007, and wrapped after 127 days on November 15th, on time and under budget. They shot in Chicago for exteriors, then moved to England for interiors at Pinewood Studios and Cardington Airfield. A quick stint in Hong Kong added that skyline flair. Tragically, during post-production in January 2008, Heath Ledger passed away from an accidental overdose. The film is dedicated to him, and the editing process became deeply emotional for Nolan and the team, but they honored his work without changes. When it hit theaters on July 18, 2008, after a July 14th premiere, the world went wild. The marketing was genius, an innovative viral campaign by 42 Entertainment, full of alternate reality games, Jokerized dollars, fake websites, and Dentmobiles, tying into the election vibe. It countered early doubts about Ledger's casting and built insane hype. Box office? Explosive. It opened with a record $158 million weekend, grossed over $534 million domestically, and nearly $470 million internationally, crossing $1 billion worldwide, the first comic book movie to do so. It became the highest-grossing film of 2008 and held records for openings, weeks in theaters, and more. Even re-releases in 2009 for Oscar buzz, and later for anniversaries kept it alive. Critics raved, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84% on Metacritic, universal acclaim for its mature themes, visual style, and performances. Roger Ebert called it a haunted film that transcends its origins. It appeared on Best of 2008 lists everywhere, from Ebert to AFI. Awards poured in. 2 Oscars, Ledger's supporting actor and sound editing, BAFTAS, Golden Globes, Grammys for the score, Saturns, and more. It was even added to the National Film Registry in 2020 for its cultural impact. Why should you watch it right now? Because The Dark Knight isn't just a superhero movie, it's a gripping exploration of morality, chaos versus order, heroism's cost, and what happens when good people face impossible choices. It asks big questions without preaching, and it does it through heart-pounding action, razor-sharp dialogue, and characters you care about deeply. The themes feel timeless, the thin line between hero and villain, the temptation of vengeance, the power of fear, and how society holds together, or falls apart. Nolan draws from crime classics like Heat and comics like The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween, but makes it feel urgent and real. This film changed everything. It proved superhero stories could be prestige cinema, serious, adult, award-worthy. It influenced everything that came after, from the MCU's darker turns to how villains are written. Ledger's Joker is often called the greatest cinematic villain ever, terrifying because he's believable. So, if you're looking for a movie that thrills you, moves you, and makes you think, grab some popcorn, dim the lights, and dive into The Dark Knight. It's not just entertainment, it's an experience. One that reminds us why we tell stories in the first place. You won't regret it. In fact, I guarantee it'll stay with you forever. Imagine this. It's 2008, and the world is on the edge of its seat for something that feels bigger than any superhero movie has ever dared to be. A film that grips you by the throat from the very first frame, drags you through the darkest corners of a crumbling city, and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about heroes, villains, and the thin line between them. Today, I'm your guide through why The Dark Knight isn't just worth watching. It's essential. It's the kind of movie that doesn't just entertain. It haunts you, challenges you, and stays with you years later. If you've never experienced it on a big screen, or even if you have, trust me, by the time we're done here, you'll be counting down the seconds until you can hit play. Let's start at the beginning. This masterpiece comes from the brilliant mind of Christopher Nolan, the director who already stunned us with Batman Begins in 2005. He returns here as director, co-writer, alongside his brother Jonathan Nolan, and co-producer. The story was shaped with help from David S. Goyer, blending gritty crime drama influences like Heat and The Godfather with iconic Batman comics, such as The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween. Nolan wanted to push the boundaries. No cartoonish capes, no easy answers. This is a serious, adult exploration of chaos, morality, and what it really means to fight for a city that's falling apart. The budget? A hefty $185 million. Big money for 2008, but every dollar is visible in the stunning practical effects, massive sets, and groundbreaking visuals. Produced by Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, Nolan's wife and longtime collaborator, and Nolan himself, with executive producers including Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull. Warner Brothers Pictures handled distribution, making this a true US-UK co-production that feels both epic and intimate. Now the cast. This is where the magic truly ignites. Christian Bale reprises Bruce Wayne/Batman with ferocious intensity. His Batman is no longer just finding his footing, he's carrying the weight of his choices, his voice a gravelly whisper that echoes the toll of endless nights. Bale trained rigorously, sticking to the Kesey fighting style, and pushed for more agility in the suit. He even insisted on performing a rooftop edge stunt himself atop Chicago's Willis Tower. Then there's Heath Ledger as the Joker. Prepare yourself. This performance is legendary, transformative, and still sends chills down spines. Ledger locked himself away in a hotel room for about 6 weeks, isolating to craft the character. He kept a Joker diary filled with clippings, photos, twisted notes, and inspirations from sources like ventriloquists, punk legends Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious, and even Francis Bacon paintings. His voice shifts from high-pitched menace to low growl. He applied his own smeared makeup, letting it look increasingly worn and chaotic. Ledger even directed the Joker's chilling homemade hostage videos himself, filming them from the character's chaotic perspective to make them feel raw and unhinged. The lip-licking tick? It helped keep the prosthetic scars in place during long takes. His commitment was absolute. He stayed in character on set, startling co-stars like Michael Caine so much in one scene that Caine forgot his lines. Sadly, Ledger passed away from an accidental overdose in January 2008 during post-production. The film is dedicated to him and stuntman Conway Wycliffe, who tragically died in a rehearsal accident. Ledger's work earned him a posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, the first for a comic book film, plus Golden Globes, BAFTAs, and more. It's not just acting, it's a force of nature. Aaron Eckhart shines as Harvey Dent, Gotham's idealistic district attorney, charismatic, hopeful, the white knight the city needs through the system. Maggie Gyllenhaal brings fresh depth to Rachel Dawes, replacing Katie Holmes from the first film, treating her as a new character caught in impossible emotional crossfire. Gary Oldman is quietly powerful as Lieutenant James Gordon, the honest cop who's Batman's ally and the story's moral anchor. Supporting players elevate everything. Michael Caine as the wise, loving Alfred Pennyworth, always with perfect timing and heart. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, the tech genius who builds Batman's arsenal with quiet genius. Then there's Eric Roberts as mob boss Sal Maroni, Chin Han as the sly Lau, Richie Coster as the Chechen, Michael Jai White as Gamble, Colin McFarlane as Commissioner Loeb, Monique Gabriella Kernan as Detective Ramirez, Keith Sarabica, and Ron Dean as corrupt cops, Stevens and Wirtz, Joshua Harto as Reese, Anthony Michael Hall as news anchor, Mike Engel, Nestor Carbonell as Mayor Garcia, William Fichtner as the bank manager in the opening, Tom Lister Jr. as a prisoner, Beatrice Rosen as a socialite date, David Dasmalkian as Thomas Schiff, and cameos from Cillian Murphy reprising Scarecrow, Senator Patrick Leahy, and musician Matt Skiba. The runtime is a taut 152 minutes. Every second counts, thanks to editor Lee Smith's aggressive cuts. No deleted scenes. Nolan trimmed the fat before shooting. Visually, revolutionary. Cinematographer Wally Pfister captured Chicago as Gotham, its skyscrapers, streets, and elevated trains transformed into a living, breathing nightmare. They pioneered major IMAX filming. About 28 minutes of the movie, including the bank heist and massive chases, shot on huge 70mm cameras for immersive scale. Practical stunts ruled. That iconic truck flip on LaSalle Street? Real, tested by engineers to avoid damaging utilities. Driver Jim Wilkie flipped an 18-wheeler with minimal CGI, just removing a ram. The hospital explosion used a condemned Brax factory rigged for demolition. The Batpod, that insane motorcycle from the Tumbler, was practical. Built from kit-bashed parts, ridden by stuntman Jean-Pierre Goy after months of training. The Joker slamming a pencil into a table? Pure practical risk. The bus in the opening bank heist? Disassembled, rebuilt inside the old Chicago post office, then blasted backward with an air cannon. Hong Kong rooftops, London power stations, Pinewood studio sets, all grounded in reality. Production designer Nathan Crowley created the Bat Bunker in a massive hangar, inspired by 1960s Chicago. The Batsuit got upgrades, stretchy materials, over 100 urethane armor pieces for movement. Makeup for the Joker's scars was organic, applied daily to look progressively messier. The score, Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's masterpiece. Zimmer's two-note Joker motif is pure dread, punk, electronic, chaotic. Howard's themes for Dent twist with corruption. Recorded at Air Studios, it amplifies every tense heartbeat. Filming spanned April to November 2007, 127 days, on time and under budget. Chicago generated $45 million economically. The viral marketing was genius. 42 Entertainment's ARG with Jokerized dollars, fake websites, Dent election campaigns tying into 2008 politics. It countered early doubts about Ledger brilliantly. Release day, July 18, 2008. It exploded. Record $158.4 million opening weekend, biggest ever at the time. $67.2 million Friday, $18.5 million midnight, $6.3 million IMAX. Worldwide, it crossed $1 billion. First superhero film to do so, highest grossing of 2008, fourth ever billion-dollar movie. Domestic $534 million plus, international nearly $470 million. Re-releases pushed it over $1 billion again. Critics? 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84% on Metacritic, called a haunted crime epic, mature, thrilling. Roger Ebert gave 4 stars. It swept Best of 2008 lists, earned 2 Oscars, Ledgers and sound editing, plus Grammys, Saturns, and more. In 2020, added to the National Film Registry for Cultural Impact. Why watch it? Because The Dark Knight raises the bar forever. It asks profound questions about order versus anarchy, the cost of heroism, how far good people go against impossible evil, without preaching. It's heart-pounding action wrapped in razor-sharp dialogue, unforgettable characters, and visuals that still stun. Ledger's Joker is the greatest villain ever put on screen. Terrifying because he's real. Bale's Batman is raw humanity under the mask. The whole film feels urgent, timeless, alive. Imagine this. It's the summer of 2008, and Hollywood is about to get shaken to its core by a film that doesn't just push the boundaries of superhero cinema, it shatters them completely. A movie that turns Gotham into a living, breathing pressure cooker of moral dilemmas, where every explosion, every chase, every whispered line feels raw and real. If you've been sleeping on The Dark Knight, or if you've seen it but haven't truly felt its weight lately, let me pull you in deeper. This isn't just a film to watch. It's an experience that demands your full attention, one that will make your heart race, your mind spin, and leave you staring at the ceiling long after it's over. Stick with me, because I'm about to show you exactly why The Dark Knight remains one of the most essential, influential, and downright gripping movies ever made. Directed by the masterful Christopher Nolan, who co-wrote the screenplay with his brother Jonathan Nolan and drew from a story crafted alongside David S. Goyer, this sequel to Batman Begins takes everything great about the first film and amplifies it into something epic, philosophical, and unflinchingly intense. Nolan wasn't content with making another comic book flick. He wanted a modern crime tragedy, inspired by classics like Heat, The Godfather, and dark Batman comics such as The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween. The result? A story that explores escalation, how one man's fight against crime can birth even greater chaos, without ever feeling preachy. It's smart, layered, and relentlessly engaging. The production budget clocked in at $185 million, a serious investment that paid off in spades through jaw-dropping practical effects and real-world scale. Produced by Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan himself, with executive producers Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull, this was a US-UK co-production distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. Principal photography kicked off on April 18, 2007, and wrapped after 127 intense days on November 15th, remarkably on time and under budget, despite the massive scope. The cast is nothing short of legendary. Christian Bale returns as Bruce Wayne/Batman, more haunted and committed than ever, pushing his body to the limit with Keezy fighting training and performing daring stunts like the rooftop edge scene atop Chicago's Willis Tower himself. His gravelly voice and unyielding intensity make Batman feel like a man on the edge, relatable, flawed, and utterly human. But then there's Heath Ledger as the Joker. This performance is the stuff of legend, terrifying, mesmerizing, and deeply human in its madness. Ledger isolated himself in a London hotel room for about 6 weeks, crafting a Joker diary packed with clippings, twisted notes, and inspirations from punk icons like Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious, ventriloquists, and even Francis Bacon's distorted paintings. He developed that erratic, high-pitched voice mixed with a low growl, complete with a lip-licking tick to manage the prosthetic scars. Ledger even directed his own chilling homemade hostage videos, filming them from the Joker's unhinged perspective. On set, he stayed in character, startling Michael Caine so badly during a penthouse scene that Caine forgot his lines entirely. Tragically, Ledger passed away from an accidental overdose in January 2008, just as post-production was underway. The film is dedicated to him and stuntman Conway Wycliffe, who died in a rehearsal accident. Ledger's work earned him a posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, the first ever for a comic book performance, along with a Golden Globe, BAFTA, SAG, and more. It's not hyperbole to call this one of the greatest villain portrayals in cinema history. Aaron Eckhart delivers a charismatic, idealistic Harvey Dent, the White Knight Gotham desperately needs through the justice system. Maggie Gyllenhaal steps in as Rachel Dawes, bringing fresh emotional depth and treating the role as a new character entirely. Gary Oldman grounds everything as the steadfast Lieutenant James Gordon, while Michael Caine offers warm wisdom as Alfred. Morgan Freeman brings quiet genius as Lucius Fox, and Cillian Murphy reprises Scarecrow in a chilling cameo. The supporting cast is stacked. Eric Roberts as mob boss Sal Maroni, Chin Han as the Slick Lau, Richie Coster as the Chechen, Michael Jai White as Gamble, Colin McFarlane as Commissioner Loeb, Monique Gabriella Kernan as Detective Ramirez, Keith Sarabaika and Rondine as corrupt detectives, Joshua Hardo as Reese, Anthony Michael Hall as news anchor Mike Engel, Nestor Carbonell as Mayor Garcia, William Fichtner as the bank manager Tom Lister Jr., as a prisoner Beatrice Rosen as a socialite, David Dasmalkian as Thomas Schiff, Melinda McGraw, Nathan Gamble and Hannah Gunn as Gordon's family, plus cameos from Patrick Leahy as a senator and musician Matt Skiba. The runtime is a perfectly paced 152 minutes, edited by Lee Smith with ruthless precision. Nolan cut anything unnecessary before shooting even began. Visually, it's groundbreaking. Cinematographer Wally Pfister turned Chicago into Gotham, using its towering skyscrapers, multi-level streets like Wacker Drive and LaSalle Street, elevated trains, and locations like the old Chicago main post office for the bank heist, Navy Pier for harbor scenes, Willis Tower for rooftops, and a condemned Brax factory for a massive explosion. They filmed in Hong Kong for Skyline Flare, and at Pinewood Studios/Cardington Airfield in England for interiors like the Bat Bunker. What made it revolutionary? Nolan shot about 15 to 20% of the film, roughly 28 minutes, with IMAX 70mm cameras, the first major feature to do so extensively. Those huge immersive sequences, the bank heist, the epic truck chase, explode off the screen in breathtaking detail. Practical effects dominated. That truck flip on LaSalle Street? Real, after engineer tests to avoid damage. The hospital explosion? They blew up a real building. The Bat Pod? A practical beast kit-bashed from parts, ridden by trained stuntmen. The opening bus crash? The bus was disassembled, rebuilt inside the post office behind a false wall, then blasted backward with an air cannon. Nolan's team prioritized real stunts over CGI, with visual effects houses handling only about 700 shots minimally. The Batsuit was upgraded for flexibility with stretchy materials and over 100 urethane armor pieces. The Joker's makeup used supple prosthetics, applied daily to look messier and more chaotic over time. Ledger even applied his own lipstick. The score by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is iconic. Zimmer's two-note Joker motif, punky, electronic, corrosive, builds dread like nothing else, while Howard's themes for Dent start hopeful and warp into darkness. Recorded at Air Studios, it pulses with tension. The viral marketing by 42 Entertainment was genius. An ARG starting in 2007 with Jokerized dollars, fake websites, pixel-by-pixel image reveals, and Dentmobiles tying into the 2008 election. It countered early Ledger doubts and built massive hype. Released July 18, 2008, it shattered records. $158.4 million opening weekend, biggest ever then. $67.2 million Friday, crossed $1 billion worldwide. The first superhero film to do so, highest grossing of 2008, fourth all-time at release. Domestic over $533 million, international nearly $470 million, with re-releases pushing higher. Critics adored it, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84% on Metacritic, calling it a mature crime epic. Roger Ebert gave 4 stars, praising its haunting depth. It swept awards, 2 Oscars, Ledgers in sound editing, plus Grammys, Saturns, and more. In 2020, it joined the National Film Registry. Why watch it? Because The Dark Knight asks the hardest questions. What separates order from anarchy? How much are you willing to sacrifice to fight evil? It does this through pulse-pounding action, razor-sharp dialogue, and characters that feel achingly real. Ledger's Joker is chaos made flesh, believable, terrifying. Bale's Batman is a man breaking under the weight of his mission. The film changed everything. It proved superhero stories could be prestige art, influenced darker franchises, and sparked conversations about heroism's cost that still echo today. Imagine this. It's July 2008, and theaters around the world are packed with people who know something massive is about to hit. A film that takes the superhero genre, strips away the fantasy, and replaces it with raw, pulse-pounding reality. A story set in a Gotham that feels like our world, corrupt, chaotic, on the brink, where one man's quest to save his city unleashes forces that threaten to tear it apart. If you're wondering why The Dark Knight is still hailed as a masterpiece nearly 2 decades later, let me take you through every layer of this cinematic triumph. This isn't just a movie. It's a landmark that redefined what blockbusters could achieve: thrilling, intelligent, emotionally charged, and impossible to shake. Directed by the visionary Christopher Nolan, who also co-wrote the screenplay with his brother Jonathan Nolan and contributed to the story with David S. Goyer, this sequel elevates the grounded realism he established in Batman Begins. Nolan drew inspiration from crime epics like Michael Mann's Heat and Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, while weaving in dark comic book elements from The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween. The core theme? Escalation. How one vigilante's war on crime can provoke an even greater, more unpredictable evil. It's philosophical without being heavy-handed, action-packed without being mindless. The production budget sat at $185 million, a bold sum that funded an extraordinary commitment to practical filmmaking. Produced by Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan, with executive producers including Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull. This US-UK co-production by Warner Bros. Pictures prioritized real-world authenticity over digital shortcuts. Principal photography ran from April 18 to November 15, 2007, 127 days, remarkably on schedule and under budget. Chicago stood in for Gotham, its towering architecture, elevated trains, and bustling streets capturing the city's grit. Key locations included the old Chicago main post office for the explosive opening bank heist, where the bus was disassembled, rebuilt inside behind a false wall, and blasted backward with an air cannon. South LaSalle Street for the iconic truck flip and chase sequences, with the Chicago Board of Trade Tower looming in the background. Lake Street under the L tracks for high-speed pursuits. Wacker Drive for multi-level action. Navy Pier for harbor shots. The Twin Anchors Bar on North Sedgwick Street, still bearing scars from repeated takes on the bar top. And even the Willis Tower, formerly Sears Tower, for breathtaking rooftop edges. A condemned Brax candy factory on Cicero Avenue became Gotham General Hospital for a massive, real demolition explosion. Production then shifted to Hong Kong for skyline sequences, Pinewood Studios, and Cardington Airfield in England for interiors like the Bat Bunker, and quick shots in London, spots like Battersea Power Station. What truly set this film apart was Nolan's pioneering use of IMAX 70mm cameras, the first major feature to shoot significant portions, about 28 minutes, including the bank heist and epic chases, in this massive format. The result? Immersive, crystal-clear sequences that make you feel the scale and danger up close. Special effects supervisor Chris Corbould and his team went all in on practical stunts. That heart-stopping 18-wheeler truck flip on LaSalle Street? Completely real. A semi-truck rigged with a hydraulic ram, later digitally removed, tested meticulously to avoid damaging underground utilities, flipped in one take by stunt driver Jim Wilkie. The Batpod? That wild motorcycle deploying from the tumbler? A practical vehicle built on a custom tubular frame weighing thousands of pounds, ridden by only one trained stuntman, Jean-Pierre Goy, after months of practice. Steering with shoulders, body prone for speed. The hospital explosion? They wired a real building for demolition. Helicopter crashes, grenade intercepts, rooftop leaps, all grounded in physics, with minimal CGI, around 650 to 700 shots total, mostly enhancements rather than replacements. The Batsuit was refined for better mobility. Stretchy fabrics, over 100 urethane armor pieces. The Joker's scarred makeup, applied daily with prosthetics, grew messier organically to reflect chaos. The score by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is legendary. Zimmer's relentless, punk-infused two-note Joker motif builds unbearable tension, while Howard's themes for hope and corruption twist into something darker. Recorded at Air Studios, it pulses through every frame. The cast delivers performances that elevate the material to art. Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne/Batman, brooding, physically committed, his gravelly voice deepened further in post-production. He performed high-risk stunts himself, like the Willis Tower Edge, and pushed the suit's limits. Heath Ledger's Joker is the film's beating, terrifying heart. Ledger prepared intensely. 6 weeks isolated in a London hotel, compiling a Joker diary with clippings, notes, photos, and inspirations from ventriloquists, Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, and Francis Bacon's distorted art. He experimented with voices, high-pitched menace to guttural growl, developed the lip-licking tic to manage prosthetics during takes, and directed his own hostage videos for raw authenticity. On set, he stayed in character, startling Michael Caine so badly in the penthouse scene that Caine forgot his lines. Ledger improvised moments like the mocking clap in the jail cell. Tragically, he passed away from an accidental prescription overdose in January 2008 at age 28 during editing. The film is dedicated to him and stuntman Conway Wycliffe, killed in a rehearsal accident. Ledger's posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, first for a comic book role, was richly deserved, alongside Golden Globes, BAFTAs, SAGs, and more. Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, charismatic, idealistic. Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel Dawes, emotional, layered. Gary Oldman as Gordon, steadfast. Michael Caine as Alfred, heartfelt wisdom. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, quiet brilliance. And a deep bench, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Sarabaika, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dasmalkian, Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, and cameos like Patrick Leahy. The 152-minute runtime, edited by Lee Smith, flies by. No wasted moments. The marketing was revolutionary. 42 Entertainment's ARG with Jokerized dollars, fake sites, Dent campaigns mirroring 2008 politics. On July 18, 2008, it exploded. Record $158.4 million opening weekend, biggest ever then, $67.2 million Friday, $18.5 million midnight, including $6.3 million IMAX, crossing $1 billion worldwide. First superhero film to do so, highest grossing of 2008. Domestic $533+ million, international $470+ million. It held records for openings, IMAX, and more. Re-releases pushed higher. Critics loved it. 94% Rotten Tomatoes, 84 Metacritic, calling it a mature crime masterpiece. Roger Ebert gave 4 stars, 2 Oscars, Ledgers and sound editing, plus Grammys, Saturns. In 2020, National Film Registry induction. Why watch The Dark Knight today? It asks timeless questions. How far does heroism go before it becomes vengeance? Can order survive anarchy? Ledger's Joker, unpredictable, humanly terrifying, forces everyone to confront their limits. Bale's Batman, a man, not a god, bears the cost. The practical spectacle, sharp dialogue, moral depth, it all feels urgent, real, alive. Imagine stepping into a theater in the summer of 2008, the lights dimming, the anticipation thick in the air, and then, bam! The screen explodes with one of the most unforgettable opening sequences in movie history. A bank heist told with surgical precision, tension so thick you can feel it in your chest, and a masked figure whose grin promises nothing but destruction. From that first moment, The Dark Knight grabs you and never lets go. If you haven't felt that grip lately, or if you've somehow missed this masterpiece altogether, let me walk you through every reason this film is not just worth your time, but deserves to be one of the first things you watch when you need something truly powerful. Christopher Nolan didn't just direct this. He orchestrated it like a symphony of chaos and control. Working again with his brother Jonathan Nolan on the screenplay and building on the story foundation laid with David S. Goyer, Nolan took the grounded, realistic Batman world he created in Batman Begins and pushed it into darker, more dangerous territory. This isn't a comic book adventure. It's a full-blown psychological crime thriller disguised as one. The central idea of escalation runs like a live wire through every scene. One man's war on crime doesn't end threats. It births something far worse. Nolan pulls from real-world crime sagas. Michael Mann's Heat is a huge influence, with its cat-and-mouse intensity, and even echoes of The Godfather in the power struggles. But he filters it all through Batman mythology drawn from landmark comics like The Killing Joke, The Dark Knight Returns, and The Long Halloween. The result is a story that feels urgent, adult, and deeply human. The budget of $185 million was massive for its time, yet every cent is visible in the commitment to reality over spectacle. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Christopher Nolan produced, backed by executive producers Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull. Warner Brothers Pictures released this US-UK co-production with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing they had something special. Filming lasted 127 days from April 18th to November 15th, 2007. On schedule, under budget, despite the sheer scale. Chicago became Gotham in the most authentic way possible. The city's towering steel and glass canyons, its multi-level streets, Wacker Drive, LaSalle Street, Lake Street, its iconic elevated trains, and its gritty industrial corners all transformed into the decaying metropolis we see on screen. The old Chicago Main Post Office hosted the bank heist, where they literally built a bus inside the building behind a fake wall, then used an air cannon to send it crashing backward through the brick. South LaSalle Street saw the truck flip that still makes jaws drop. Engineers tested everything to avoid damaging underground cables and pipes. The condemned Brax Candy Factory on Cicero Avenue was wired for a real demolition to become the burning hospital. Navy Pier, Twin Anchors Bar, the Willis Tower rooftop, and more locations gave the film a tangible, lived-in feel. Hong Kong added its dazzling night skyline for one unforgettable sequence, while Pinewood Studios and Cardington Airfield in England housed massive interiors like the Bat Bunker. Nolan's boldest choice? Shooting roughly 28 minutes, about 15 to 20% of the film, with giant IMAX 70mm cameras. This was the first major motion picture to commit so heavily to the format, and it makes those action sequences feel monumental, immersive, almost overwhelming in their clarity and scale. The practical effects team, led by Chris Corbould, treated CGI as a last resort. The Batpod, a beast of a motorcycle that unfolds from the tumbler, was built from scratch on a custom frame, weighed thousands of pounds, and was ridden at high speed by only one man, stunt driver Jean-Pierre Goy, who spent months mastering the shoulder-steered controls. The hospital blast? Real pyrotechnics on a real building. Helicopter crashes, grenade throws, rooftop falls, all executed with real physics. The upgraded batsuit featured stretchable fabrics and over 100 individual urethane armor plates for greater range of motion. The Joker's makeup, crafted with soft prosthetics, was applied fresh each day and allowed to degrade naturally, sweat, smudges, and chaos building over time. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score remains one of the most iconic in modern cinema. Zimmer's two-note Joker theme, simple, corrosive, electronic, punk-inspired, creates instant dread. Howard layers in grand, tragic brass for Harvey Dent that slowly warps into something broken. Recorded at Air Studios, the music doesn't just accompany the film, it drives it. And the performances, where do we even begin? Christian Bale's Batman/Bruce Wayne is raw, exhausted, and dangerously close to breaking. He deepened his voice further in post, trained relentlessly in Kesey fighting, and insisted on performing the terrifying Willis Tower ledge stunt himself. Heath Ledger's Joker is the film's dark soul. His preparation was obsessive. Weeks alone in a hotel, a personal Joker diary filled with photos, clippings, psychotic rants, and influences from Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, ventriloquists, and Francis Bacon's grotesque portraits. He shaped that voice, high, mocking, guttural, developed the compulsive lip lick to deal with the prosthetics, and even shot his own hostage videos in character. On set, he never broke character, unnerving everyone, including Michael Caine, who completely blanked during the penthouse confrontation. Ledger's death in January 2008 from an accidental overdose at just 28 left the industry stunned. The film is dedicated to him and fallen stuntman Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, the first ever for a superhero film, was inevitable and deeply earned. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent radiates charm and conviction. Maggie Gyllenhaal brings real emotional fire to Rachel Dawes. Gary Oldman's Gordon is the quiet, steady heartbeat of integrity. Michael Caine's Alfred is wise, tender, and heartbreaking. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is cool, clever, and quietly heroic. And the ensemble, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Sarabaika, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dastmalchian, Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow cameo, and more. Every role feels essential. At 152 minutes, edited by Lee Smith with surgical precision, there is not a single wasted second. The marketing campaign by 42 Entertainment was groundbreaking, an alternate reality game that unfolded over months with Jokerized currency, hacked websites, pixel-by-pixel reveals, and Dent for DA rallies that mirrored the 2008 political climate. Released July 18, 2008, it shattered every expectation. $158.4 million opening weekend, record at the time, $67.2 million on Friday alone, $1 billion worldwide gross, the first comic book movie to reach that milestone, making it the highest-grossing film of 2008. Critics were unanimous, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84 on Metacritic, 4 stars from Roger Ebert, countless year-end top 10 lists. 2 Academy Awards, Ledger's supporting actor and sound editing, plus Grammys, BAFTAs, Saturns, and in 2020, induction into the National Film Registry. Why does The Dark Knight still matter so much? Because it asks the hardest questions without easy answers. What is the price of being the hero? How long can order hold against pure anarchy? Ledger's Joker isn't a monster. He's a mirror, forcing every character and every viewer to confront their own breaking point. Bale's Batman isn't invincible. He's human, bleeding, doubting. The film is thrilling, heartbreaking, philosophical, and visually breathtaking all at once. This is cinema that moves mountains. It proved superhero films could be serious art. It changed how villains are written, how action is shot, how stories are told. Imagine the moment the lights go down and that first, bone-chilling sound hits, the slow, deliberate scrape of a pencil across a table, followed by the Joker's voice cutting through the silence like a knife. From that instant, The Dark Knight doesn't just start, it invades. It pulls you into a world where Gotham isn't some distant comic book city. It's a living, breathing pressure cooker of corruption, fear, and fragile hope. And right now, in 2025 and beyond, this film feels more relevant, more urgent, more necessary than ever. If you're looking for a movie that doesn't just entertain, but actually challenges your soul, makes your pulse race, and lingers in your thoughts for days, this is the one. Let me take you even deeper into why The Dark Knight is still considered by millions to be the greatest superhero film ever made, and one of the finest films of the 21st century, period. Christopher Nolan didn't approach this as a sequel. He approached it as a war film, a moral tragedy, a character study wrapped in the skin of a blockbuster. Co-writing with his brother Jonathan Nolan and building on the story foundation he created with David S. Goyer, Nolan crafted a narrative that is relentlessly focused on consequences. Every action has a ripple. Every choice costs something. The theme of escalation isn't just mentioned. It's the engine of the entire story. One vigilante's war on organized crime doesn't clean the streets. It summons something far more dangerous, something that thrives on disorder. Nolan openly cited Michael Mann's Heat as a blueprint for the cat-and-mouse intensity between hero and villain, while the philosophical weight draws from Albert Camus, Friedrich Nietzsche, and the darkest corners of Batman lore, Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, and Jeff Loeb's The Long Halloween. This is a film that respects its comic roots while transcending them completely. The $185 million budget was used with surgical intelligence. No wasted spectacle. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Christopher Nolan produced, supported by executive producers Benjamin Melniker, Michael E. Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull. Warner Brothers trusted Nolan to deliver something unprecedented, and he delivered on every level. The 127-day shoot, April 18 to November 15, 2007, was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Chicago gave itself over to the production. The city council closed down entire streets and bridges for weeks. The famous truck flip on South LaSalle Street required months of planning. Structural engineers mapped underground utilities so the hydraulic ram wouldn't cause real damage. The bus in the bank heist? They physically cut it in half, rebuilt it inside the old Chicago main post office, then used compressed air to launch it backward through the wall in one explosive take. The hospital explosion? A real condemned factory on Cicero Avenue rigged with hundreds of charges and detonated for real. Hong Kong's gleaming skyscrapers provided the vertigo-inducing nighttime chase. England's Pinewood Studios and the massive Cardington hangars housed the cavernous bat bunker, the interrogation room, the penthouse, and more. Every location feels authentic because it mostly was. The IMAX commitment changed cinema forever. Nolan shot approximately 28 minutes, roughly 1/6 of the film, in full 70mm IMAX, including the entire bank heist, the tumbler to Batpod transition, the convoy ambush, and the Hong Kong skyscraper sequence. Watching those scenes in IMAX is like being inside the action. The detail, the scale, the sound. It overwhelms the senses in the best possible way. Practical effects were the religion on this set. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod from the ground up, a 3,000+ pound machine with no traditional steering, controlled entirely by the rider's body weight and shoulder pressure. Stuntman Jean-Pierre Goy spent months training until he could ride it at full speed through traffic. The Joker's pencil trick? Performed live, with real risk. The ferry sequences? Real boats, real extras, real tension. CGI was used sparingly, only about 650 to 700 shots total, mostly for cleanup and enhancements. The Batsuit was redesigned with flexible Kevlar-like materials and segmented armor so Christian Bale could actually move and fight like a human being, not a statue. The makeup for the Joker deserves its own chapter. The scars were soft silicone prosthetics, applied fresh every day, and deliberately allowed to look worse as the story progressed. Sweatier, more smeared, more unhinged. Heath Ledger often applied his own lipstick and eye makeup for consistency and immediacy. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard created a score that is now legendary. The Joker's theme, those two descending notes played on distorted cellos, guitars, and synths, became the sound of pure dread. It's aggressive, dissonant, punk-inspired. Dent's theme starts noble and orchestral, then fractures and warps as the story darkens. The music doesn't sit behind the action, it attacks you. Christian Bale's Batman is a man at war with himself. He pushed his voice even lower, trained harder, and performed some of the most dangerous stunts himself, including the heart-stopping moment on the Willis Tower ledge. Heath Ledger's Joker remains one of the most perfectly realized villains in film history. His preparation was monastic. 6 weeks in a hotel room, a handwritten diary of clippings, rants, and twisted inspirations from Sid Vicious, Johnny Rotten ventriloquist dummies, and Francis Bacon's screaming popes. He created the voice, the tics, the mannerisms. He directed his own hostage videos. He stayed in character between takes, unnerving the entire cast. Michael Caine has said he genuinely forgot his lines during the penthouse scene because Ledger's presence was so unsettling. Ledger died tragically in January 2008 at 28 from an accidental overdose. The film is dedicated to him and to Conway Wycliffe, the stunt coordinator who died in a rehearsal crash. Ledger's posthumous Oscar win for Best Supporting Actor was historic, the first ever for a comic book performance, and utterly deserved. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is heartbreakingly hopeful. Maggie Gyllenhaal gives Rachel real fire and vulnerability. Gary Oldman is the moral compass as Gordon. Michael Caine's Alfred is the emotional anchor. Morgan Freeman's Fox is calm, brilliant, indispensable. The ensemble, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Sarabeka, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dasmalchian, Cillian Murphy Scarecrow, and dozens more. Every face matters. Lee Smith's editing is relentless. 152 minutes, zero fat. The viral campaign by 42 Entertainment is still studied in marketing classes. Joker playing cards, hacked websites, pixel reveal countdowns, fake campaign rallies. I believe in Harvey Dent stickers everywhere. It turned skepticism about Ledger into feverish excitement. July 18, 2008, $158.4 million opening weekend, record. $1 billion worldwide gross, first for a superhero film, highest grossing movie of 2008. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84 on Metacritic, 2 Oscars, National Film Registry, countless greatest of all time lists. Why does it endure? Because it stares into the abyss of human nature and refuses to blink. It asks, what would you do if someone tried to burn your world down just to watch it burn? How much darkness would you accept to protect the light? Ledger's Joker is chaos with a human face, terrifying because he's believable. Bale's Batman is hope with broken bones, heroic because he's fallible. The film is action, drama, philosophy, spectacle, heartbreak, and moral fire all at once. Imagine the summer of 2008 again, just for a second. The air is thick with excitement, people lining up around the block for midnight screenings, whispers spreading like wildfire about a performance so electric, so dangerous, that it might just change everything you thought you knew about villains. That's the atmosphere The Dark Knight created before anyone even sat down in their seat. And today, all these years later, that same electricity still crackles through every frame. If you've watched it once, twice, 10 times, or if you've somehow never let it pull you in, listen close. Because this is the film that doesn't just entertain, it confronts you. It forces you to look at the world, at people, at yourself, and ask questions you might not want to answer. That's why The Dark Knight isn't aging, it's growing stronger. Let me keep pulling you deeper into this masterpiece, layer by layer, detail by detail, until you can't wait another second to experience it again. Christopher Nolan's direction is like a tightly coiled spring. He doesn't rush, he doesn't pander. Every shot, every cut, every silence is deliberate. Working once more with his brother Jonathan Nolan on the script, and drawing from the story blueprint he built with David S. Goyer, Nolan turns what could have been a simple superhero sequel into a towering tragedy about power, morality, and the fragility of civilization. He has said openly that he wanted to make a film that felt like a crime epic first and a Batman story second. You can feel the DNA of Michael Mann's Heat in the long, tense stare-downs between pursuer and pursued. You can sense the operatic weight of The Godfather in the shifting alliances and betrayals among Gotham's underworld. And underneath it all, the dark poetry of comics like The Killing Joke, The Dark Knight Returns, and The Long Halloween breathes life into the characters. Nolan never lectures. He simply shows you what happens when good intentions meet absolute chaos, and then he lets you wrestle with the aftermath. The $185 million budget wasn't spent on flashy CGI fireworks. It was spent on reality. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan himself produced the film with a clear vision. make it feel like it could happen tomorrow. Executive producers Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, and Thomas Tull gave Nolan the trust and resources to shoot on location, build massive practical sets, and pioneer new technology. Warner Brothers Pictures backed a project that could have easily gone wrong, and instead became a legend. The shoot itself was a marvel of planning and endurance. 127 days from April 18th to November 15th, 2007. Chicago surrendered its streets for weeks at a time. Entire blocks of downtown were shut down. The Board of Trade Building, the LaSalle Street Canyon, the Lake Street Bridge, Wacker Drive's double-decker madness all became Gotham. The opening bank heist was filmed inside the cavernous old Chicago main post office, where the crew dismantled a full-sized school bus, rebuilt it piece by piece behind a fake brick wall, then used a massive air cannon to hurl it backward through the wall in a single, perfect take. The truck flip that still makes audiences gasp? That was a real 18-wheeler on South LaSalle Street, fitted with a hidden hydraulic ram, flipped in one heart-stopping moment after engineers triple-checked the street's underground infrastructure to prevent disaster. The hospital explosion? They took a real abandoned Brax candy factory on Cicero Avenue, wired it with hundreds of charges, and detonated it for real. Controlled chaos captured in wide IMAX shots. Speaking of IMAX, that was Nolan's game changer. He committed roughly 28 minutes of the film to the giant 70mm IMAX format, including the entire bank heist, the high-speed chase, the Batpod debut, and the vertigo-inducing Hong Kong skyscraper sequence. Those scenes don't just look big, they feel big. The frame is so sharp, so vast, that you feel the wind, the heat, the danger. It was the first time a major Hollywood film had embraced IMAX so aggressively, and it set a new standard for what blockbuster action could be. The practical effects team, led by Chris Corbould, treated digital effects like a guilty pleasure, only used when absolutely necessary. About 650 to 700 visual effects shots total, most of them subtle cleanups or extensions. Everything else was real. The Batpod was a monster, thousands of pounds, no conventional steering wheel, controlled entirely by the rider leaning and shifting body weight. Stunt driver Jean-Pierre Goy trained for months until he could weave it through Chicago traffic at full throttle. The Joker's pencil through the table trick, performed live with real danger. The ferries in the climax, real boats, real passengers, real stakes. The Batsuit got a major upgrade, stretchable materials, segmented urethane plates, so Christian Bale could actually fight, run, and jump without looking stiff. The Joker's makeup was another layer of genius. The scars were soft silicone prosthetics, applied fresh every morning, then deliberately left to deteriorate through sweat, movement, and chaos. Heath Ledger often touched up his own lipstick and smeared the paint himself between takes to keep the look raw and inconsistent. The result is a villain who looks like he's literally falling apart as the story spirals. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard delivered a score that is now inseparable from the film. Zimmer's Joker motif, those two brutal descending notes, starts as a whisper and builds into a howling storm of distorted guitars, cellos, and electronics. It's punk aggression in musical form. Howard's themes for Harvey Dent begin with soaring, heroic brass, then slowly fracture and distort as the character's world collapses. The music doesn't support the movie. It attacks it, drives it, makes your chest tighten. Christian Bale's performance as Bruce Wayne in Batman is ferocious. He trained harder, deepened his voice even further in post-production, and insisted on doing some of the riskiest stunts himself, including the terrifying moment perched on the edge of the Willis Tower. Heath Ledger's Joker is still the gold standard for villains. His preparation was almost monastic. 6 weeks alone in a London hotel, a personal diary filled with psychotic scribbles, magazine clippings, photographs, and references to Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, ventriloquist dummies, and Francis Bacon's nightmarish paintings. He invented the voice, the tics, the compulsive lip-licking that helped him manage the prosthetics during long takes. He shot his own hostage videos in character. He stayed in the Joker between takes, unnerving the entire cast. Michael Caine has said he genuinely forgot his lines during the penthouse scene because Ledger's intensity was so overwhelming. Ledger's tragic death in January 2008 from an accidental overdose at age 28 left the world reeling. The film is dedicated to him and to stunt coordinator Conway Wycliffe, who died in a tragic rehearsal accident. Ledger's posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor The first ever for a comic book role was not just deserved, it was inevitable. Aaron Eckhart brings heartbreaking idealism to Harvey Dent. Maggie Gyllenhaal infuses Rachel Dawes with fire and fragility. Gary Oldman anchors everything as the quiet, principled Gordon. Michael Caine's Alfred is wise, loving, and devastatingly honest. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is calm brilliance personified. The supporting cast, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Sarabaika, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dastmalchian, Cillian Murphy's chilling scarecrow cameo. Every single one adds weight and texture. Lee Smith's editing is merciless. 152 minutes that never drag, never pause, never lose momentum. The viral marketing campaign by 42 Entertainment is still taught in universities. Joker playing cards mailed to influencers, websites hacked in character, pixel-by-pixel image reveals, I believe in Harvey Dent stickers plastered across cities, fake campaign rallies that mirrored the real 2008 election. It turned doubt into obsession. The release on July 18, 2008 was seismic. A record-breaking $158.4 million opening weekend, over $1 billion worldwide, the first superhero film to cross that threshold. Highest grossing film of the year. Critical acclaim poured in, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84 on Metacritic, 4 stars from Roger Ebert, endless year-end lists, 2 Oscars, Grammys, Saturns. In 2020, induction into the National Film Registry for cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. Why does The Dark Knight still feel so alive? Because it dares to ask the questions most films avoid. What happens when the rules break down? How much evil can you fight before you become it? Ledger's Joker isn't a cartoon. He's a force of human nature unleashed. Bale's Batman isn't a god. He's a man choosing to carry an impossible burden. The film is thrilling, heartbreaking, philosophical, visceral, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Imagine the feeling when the credits finally roll, but you don't move. You just sit there in the dark, heart still pounding, mind racing, replaying moments that hit harder than any explosion on screen. That's the power The Dark Knight has over people. Even after all these years, even in 2026 when we've seen countless superhero films come and go. This isn't just a movie that entertains for 2.5 hours. This is a film that stays inside you, quietly reshaping how you think about right and wrong, about fear, about what it really means to stand up when everything around you is falling apart. If you haven't felt that yet, or if it's been too long since you last let it wash over you, let me keep guiding you through the final layers of this absolute masterpiece so you can understand exactly why so many of us consider The Dark Knight not only the best Batman film ever made, but one of the greatest films of any genre, any era. Christopher Nolan's genius lies in restraint. He never shows off. He builds pressure slowly, deliberately, until the tension is unbearable. Co-writing with Jonathan Nolan gave the script that rare sibling alchemy, sharp, personal, unafraid of darkness. David S. Goyer's story contributions provided the mythic bones, but it's Nolan's vision that turns it into something timeless. He wanted to explore the idea that heroism isn't clean, it's dirty, it's painful, it costs you pieces of yourself every single night. And when you push back against evil, sometimes evil pushes back harder and smarter than you ever imagined. The influences are clear: the long, patient buildup of Heat, the moral ambiguity of the Godfather trilogy, the psychological terror of The Killing Joke, the gritty realism of The Long Halloween, the revolutionary anger of The Dark Knight Returns. Yet Nolan never copies. He synthesizes. He makes it all feel brand new and urgently real. That $185 million budget was never about excess. It was about commitment. Commitment to shooting on real streets. Commitment to real explosions. Commitment to making the audience feel the weight of every punch, every crash, every choice. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with precision. The executive team, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, gave them the freedom to take risks. Warner Brothers trusted the vision, and the trust paid off in one of the most perfectly realized blockbusters in history. The production was a logistical triumph. Chicago in 2007 was transformed. Entire sections of the Loop were closed for days. LaSalle Street, Wacker Drive, Lake Street, the old post office, the abandoned factory on Cicero, Every location was chosen because it already looked like Gotham. They didn't build fake cities, they used a real one and made it bleed. The truck flip, months of engineering surveys, one perfect take. The bus crash, a real bus cut apart and rebuilt inside a building, then fired backward with explosive force. The hospital, a real demolition, captured from multiple angles in IMAX. Hong Kong's skyline gave us vertigo. England's massive sound stages gave us the Bat Bunker, the mob meetings, the interrogation room that still feels claustrophobic even on the smallest screen. The IMAX decision was revolutionary. Roughly 28 minutes shot on those enormous 70mm cameras. The bank heist opens in full IMAX glory. Every mask, every movement, every gunshot feels 3 stories tall. The convoy attack, the Batpod chase, the Hong Kong drop, all of it hits with physical force. No other director at the time dared to shoot action this way. Nolan did, and he changed the game forever. Practical over digital was the mantra. Chris Corbold's effects team built everything they could. The Batpod wasn't CGI. It was a real, heavy, shoulder-steered monster that only one stuntman could handle at speed. The pencil trick, the ferries, the rooftop falls, all real whenever possible. Only about 650 visual effects shots total, most invisible. The Batsuit was rebuilt with flexible materials so Bale could actually fight like a man pushed to his physical limit. The Joker's look evolved in real time. Fresh makeup every morning but allowed to degrade naturally, smudged, sweaty, broken. Heath Ledger would touch it up himself, making sure it looked like the character was literally unraveling. The score by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard is now part of cultural DNA. Those 2 descending notes for the Joker, simple, ugly, unstoppable, create instant anxiety. The music doesn't cue emotion, it manufactures it. It claws at you. Christian Bale's Batman is a man at the end of his rope, exhausted, doubtful, dangerous. He performed high-risk stunts himself because he refused to fake the pain. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that redefines what a villain can be. No cartoon cackle, no grand plan, just pure, joyful chaos. 6 weeks of isolation, a diary of madness, influences from punk, art, madness. He directed his own videos. He never left character. He terrified everyone around him. His death at 28 from an accidental overdose shattered the world. The dedication at the end is quiet, heartbreaking. His Oscar win was history made. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is the tragedy at the heart of the film. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is fierce and real. Gary Oldman's Gordon is integrity personified. Michael Caine's Alfred is the voice of love and reason. Morgan Freeman's Fox is calm genius. Every supporting role, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Zarabica, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dastmalchian, Cillian Murphy, adds depth and gravity. Lee Smith's editing is flawless. 152 minutes of pure momentum. The marketing campaign was art in itself. 42 Entertainment created a living, breathing world before the film even opened. Fake websites, hacked messages, campaign rallies, Joker cards. It turned curiosity into obsession. The numbers speak for themselves. Record $158.4 million opening weekend. Over $1 billion worldwide. Highest grossing film of 2008. 94% critical acclaim. 2 Oscars. National Film Registry. Endless best of placements. But the real reason The Dark Knight endures? It refuses to give you comfort. It shows you a world where good people can be broken, where chaos can be seductive, where heroism can look a lot like villainy when you're standing in the ashes. Ledger's Joker isn't evil for evil's sake. He's the logical conclusion of a society that pretends everything is fine until it isn't. Bale's Batman isn't winning. He's surviving. And in that survival, there's something brutally honest. This film asks you to look at yourself. Are you the hero who holds the line, or are you one bad day away from letting go? It doesn't judge. It just shows you the mirror. Imagine the silence after the final line is spoken, after the last note of that haunting score fades into nothing. You're still sitting there, the screen black, but your mind is anything but quiet. That's the mark of a truly great film, one that doesn't end when the credits roll. It keeps unfolding inside you. And The Dark Knight does exactly that. Even now, in 2026, when superhero movies flood the market every few months, this one stands apart. It's not louder, flashier, or more packed with cameos. It's deeper, more honest, more uncomfortable, more unforgettable. If you've been holding off on revisiting it, or if you've never given it the full, undivided attention it demands, let me finish pulling you all the way in, because this is the moment you decide to let The Dark Knight change something in you. Christopher Nolan crafted this film with the patience of a master storyteller who knows exactly how much pressure the audience can take before something snaps. He and Jonathan Nolan wrote a script that feels like a conversation between two people who understand darkness intimately. David S. Goyer's original story ideas gave it structure, but it's the Nolan brothers who gave it soul, raw, conflicted, human soul. The entire narrative is built around one terrifying truth. The world is fragile. One man's attempt to impose order can create the perfect conditions for chaos to thrive. Nolan has always said he wanted to make a movie about what happens when the rules no longer apply. And he does it without speeches, without exposition dumps. He does it through action that feels real, through characters who feel broken, through a villain who feels inevitable. That $185 million budget was never about showing off. It was about truth. Truth in the locations, truth in the stunts, truth in the performances. Charles Roven and Emma Thomas produced alongside Nolan with a shared obsession for authenticity. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, understood that sometimes the biggest risk is playing it safe. Warner Brothers gave them the keys to the city, and they used them to build something that still feels dangerous. The shoot was grueling and precise. Chicago in 2007 became a character itself, cold, towering, unforgiving. Streets were shut down for days, bridges were closed. The city council worked hand in hand with the production to make it possible. The opening bank heist inside the old Chicago Main Post Office? They spent weeks preparing that single sequence, cutting a real bus in half, reassembling it behind a false wall, then blasting it backward with compressed air so perfectly that it looked like the wall had exploded outward. The truck flip on LaSalle Street? Engineers mapped every manhole, every pipe, every cable beneath the pavement. One mistake, and the street collapses. One perfect take, and cinema history is made. The hospital explosion? A real building wired for demolition, captured in sweeping IMAX shots that make you feel the heat on your face. The decision to shoot significant portions, about 28 minutes, in IMAX 70mm, was bold and brilliant. Those giant cameras don't just record images, they capture presence. The bank heist feels suffocatingly close. The chase along Lower Wacker Drive feels like you're riding in the tumbler. The Hong Kong skyscraper descent feels like falling. No digital trickery can match that scale, that clarity, that weight. The practical effects philosophy ran through everything. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a real, brutal machine. Thousands of pounds, no steering wheel, controlled only by body lean and shoulder pressure. Jean-Pierre Goy was the only stuntman who could ride it at speed through traffic. The pencil trick? Live, risky, real. The ferry dilemma? Real boats, real civilians as extras, real moral weight. CGI was kept to a minimum, around 650 to 700 shots, most of them invisible enhancements. The Batsuit was rebuilt for mobility, stretch fabrics, segmented plates, so Bale could move like a predator, not a mannequin. The Joker's makeup told its own story. Prosthetics applied fresh daily but allowed to degrade. Smudges, cracks, sweat, chaos building naturally. Ledger would often fix his own paint between takes, making sure the mask never looked too perfect. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now etched into the fabric of pop culture. Those two notes for the Joker, harsh, electronic, relentless, create anxiety before you even know why. Dense theme starts grand and hopeful, then slowly corrodes. The music isn't background. It's a character. It pushes. It pulls. It hurts. Christian Bale gave everything to Bruce Wayne in Batman. He trained harder. He deepened his voice to the breaking point. He did the rooftop ledge stunt on the Willis Tower himself because faking it would have felt wrong. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that broke molds and set new ones. 6 weeks of isolation in a hotel room, a diary of madness, clippings, drawings, rants, quotes from Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, ventriloquists, Francis Bacon's screaming figures. He shaped the voice, the walk, the lip-licking tick to manage the prosthetics. He directed his own videos. He stayed in character on set, unnerving Michael Caine so badly that Caine forgot his lines in the penthouse. Ledger's death at 28 from an accidental overdose in January 2008 still feels like a theft from the world. The film is dedicated to him and to Conway Wycliffe, the stuntman lost during rehearsal. Ledger's posthumous Oscar win for Best Supporting Actor was the industry's way of saying thank you, and it still feels like not enough. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is the film's beating broken heart. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is fierce, loving, real. Gary Oldman's Gordon is quiet strength. Michael Caine's Alfred is the soul of the movie. Morgan Freeman's Fox is calm, unflappable wisdom. Every actor in the ensemble, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Sarabaika, Ron Dean, Joshua Hardo, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fichtner, David Dastmalchian, Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow adds something essential. Lee Smith edited with a razor. 152 minutes of pure intensity. No slack, no mercy. The viral campaign was genius. 42 Entertainment built a world that felt alive. Joker cards, hacked websites, fake election rallies, I believe in Harvey Dent stickers. It turned doubt into hunger. The release on July 18, 2008 was a cultural earthquake. Record-breaking $158.4 million opening, over $1 billion worldwide, a highest-grossing film of the year, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84 on Metacritic, 2 Oscars, National Film Registry induction in 2020, endless greatest ever rankings. But here's the deepest truth. The Dark Knight doesn't let you off the hook. It shows you a hero who sacrifices everything and still loses pieces of himself. It shows you a villain who doesn't want money or power or revenge. He wants to prove that the world is one bad day away from burning itself down. He's not insane in the clinical sense. He's the embodiment of what happens when faith in systems, in people, in morality completely collapses. He's terrifying because he makes sense in a broken world. And that's why Ledger's performance cuts so deep. It's not a monster we fear. It's a mirror we recognize. Bale's Batman, on the other hand, is the opposite side of the same coin. He's not invincible. He's not even winning. He's enduring. Every night he puts on the mask, he loses a little more of Bruce Wayne. Every choice he makes edges him closer to the line he swore he'd never cross. The film never lets us forget that being the hero isn't glamorous. It's lonely, painful, and exhausting. And yet, he keeps going, because someone has to. That's the genius of The Dark Knight. It doesn't give you heroes who always win or villains who are simply evil for evil's sake. It gives you real people facing impossible dilemmas. It asks you, would you blow up a hospital to save your own skin? Would you sacrifice your principles to save the city? Would you become the villain to protect the innocent? And it never answers for you. It just holds up the question and makes you stare at it. The ensemble around them is flawless. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent starts as the shining light, the man who can save Gotham without masks, without shadows. His fall is heartbreaking because it's believable. Maggie Gyllenhaal makes Rachel feel like a real woman caught in a storm of 2 men who both love her in different, destructive ways. Gary Oldman's Gordon is the quiet, stubborn conscience that refuses to bend. Michael Caine's Alfred delivers lines that break your heart with their simple truth. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is the voice of reason, the one person who sees the cost clearly and still builds the tools to keep fighting. Every single supporting character, from the mob bosses played by Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, and Michael Jai White, to the honest cops, the corrupt ones, the terrified civilians, feels necessary. No one is wasted. No one is there just to fill space. The 152-minute runtime, shaped by Lee Smith's razor-sharp editing, moves like a freight train that never slows down. There are no filler scenes. Every moment builds tension, deepens character, or explodes into action that feels earned. The marketing campaign by 42 Entertainment was ahead of its time, creating an entire alternate reality that made fans feel like they were living in Gotham before the movie even opened. Fake websites, Jokerized dollar bills, pixel reveal countdowns, Harvey Dent for district attorney campaigns that echoed the real 2008 election. It wasn't promotion, it was immersion. When it hit theaters on July 18, 2008, it didn't just open, it detonated. A then-record $158.4 million domestic opening weekend, over $1 billion worldwide, making it the first superhero film to cross that milestone. Highest grossing movie of the year. Critical acclaim was immediate and overwhelming. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 84 on Metacritic, 4 stars from Roger Ebert, top spots on every major year-end list. 2 Academy Awards, Ledger's Best Supporting Actor and Best Sound Editing. Grammys for the score, Saturn Awards, and in 2020, preservation in the United States National Film Registry as a work of cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. But none of those numbers or awards explain why people still talk about The Dark Knight the way they do. It endures because it's honest about the human condition. It shows us that good and evil aren't always clear. That order is hard-won and easily lost. That sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and anarchy is one tired man in a mask who refuses to quit. This film changed superhero cinema forever. It proved that comic book movies could be treated as serious art. It raised the bar for villains, for moral complexity, for practical action, for storytelling ambition. Everything that came after, from the darker tones of later Marvel films to the prestige treatment of genre movies, owes something to The Dark Knight. So here's my final plea to you. Don't just watch it, experience it. Find the darkest room you can, turn the volume up until the Joker's laugh rattles your bones, let Hans Zimmer's score crawl under your skin. Watch Christian Bale's eyes behind the mask. Watch Heath Ledger's painted smile twist into something that feels too real. Watch Gotham burn and rise and burn again. Imagine the moment you realize a film has become more than entertainment. It's become a part of how you see the world. That's what The Dark Knight does to people. It sneaks past the surface thrill of capes and explosions and lodges itself somewhere deeper, somewhere that makes you question things long after the screen fades to black. Even today, on this quiet January morning in 2026, when new superhero stories arrive almost weekly, The Dark Knight still stands alone. Not because it's the loudest or the most colorful, but because it's the most honest, the most unflinching, the most human. If you've never let it fully take hold of you, or if it's been years since you felt its full weight, stay with me just a little longer. Let me bring you right to the edge, so close that the only thing left to do is press play and surrender. Christopher Nolan didn't make a sequel. He made a reckoning. Together with Jonathan Nolan on the screenplay and building on the foundational story beats he developed with David S. Goyer, he created something that feels less like a comic book movie and more like a philosophical crime epic. The central idea is brutally simple, yet endlessly complex. When you fight monsters, you risk becoming one. Or worse, you risk creating something even more monstrous. Nolan has spoken many times about wanting to examine what happens when society's thin veneer of order is tested by someone who doesn't play by any rules at all. He drew from real cinematic heavyweights. Michael Mann's Heat for the procedural intensity and moral standoffs, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather for the power dynamics and betrayals among criminals. But he fused them with the darkest, most psychologically rich Batman stories ever told. Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's The Long Halloween. The result isn't homage, it's evolution. A story that respects its roots while growing into something entirely its own. That $185 million budget was spent with ruthless intelligence. No empty spectacle. Every dollar went toward making the impossible feel real. Charles Roven and Emma Thomas produced alongside Nolan with an almost obsessive attention to authenticity. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, provided the support and freedom needed for bold choices. Warner Brothers Pictures took a gamble on a vision that could have easily become too dark, too adult, too challenging for a summer blockbuster. Instead, they got a masterpiece. The production itself was a feat of endurance and precision. Chicago in the spring and fall of 2007 became Gotham in every sense. Entire sections of the city were handed over to the crew. Major arteries like LaSalle Street, Wacker Drive, Lake Street, and Lower Wacker were shut down for extended periods. The old Chicago main post office was turned into the scene of the opening bank heist, where the crew literally built a school bus inside the building behind a false brick wall, then used a massive air cannon to send it crashing backward in one perfectly timed explosion of dust and debris. The truck flip that still takes breath away, Months of planning with structural engineers to ensure the street wouldn't collapse under the force of the hydraulic ram. One take, one perfect, real, gravity-defying flip. The hospital explosion? A condemned Brax candy factory on Cicero Avenue was demolished for real. Hundreds of charges, multiple IMAX cameras rolling, capturing the fireball in breathtaking detail. Hong Kong lent its dizzying nighttime skyline for one of the most vertigo-inducing sequences ever filmed. England's Pinewood Studios and the enormous Cardington hangars provided the space for the Bat Bunker, the mob war rooms, the penthouse, the interrogation cell, sets so large and detailed they felt like real places. The decision to shoot significant portions, approximately 28 minutes in full 70mm IMAX, remains one of the most influential choices in modern cinema. Those giant cameras don't just record, they immerse. The bank heist opens with overwhelming scale and clarity. The convoy chase feels like you're inside the tumbler. The Hong Kong drop makes your stomach drop with the character. No digital imitation has ever matched that visceral impact. Practical effects were sacred. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a genuine punishing machine, weighing thousands of pounds, steered only by body position and shoulder pressure. Only one stuntman, Jean-Pierre Goy, mastered it at full speed through city streets. The pencil-through-the-table scene? Performed live, with real risk. The ferry sequences? Real vessels, real extras, real ethical weight. CGI was restrained, roughly 650 to 700 shots, nearly all subtle enhancements rather than replacements. The Batsuit was re-engineered with flexible fabrics and segmented armor plates so Christian Bale could fight, leap, and fall like a living, breathing man under pressure. The Joker's makeup was allowed to decay naturally, fresh prosthetics every morning, but the scars were never cleaned up between takes. Sweat, smudges, cracks, chaos made visible. Heath Ledger would often reapply his own lipstick and eye makeup, ensuring the character looked progressively more unmoored. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now inseparable from the film's DNA. The Joker's two-note motif, harsh, electronic, corrosive, creates dread before a single word is spoken. Harvey Dent's theme begins with noble brass, then slowly fractures and distorts. The music doesn't underscore emotion, it generates it. It claws, it burns. Christian Bale poured everything into Batman. He pushed his voice to its limit, trained relentlessly, and performed some of the most dangerous stunts himself, including the terrifying rooftop edge on the Willis Tower, because anything less would have felt like betrayal. Heath Ledger's Joker is still the performance by which all others are measured. 6 weeks of isolation. A private diary filled with madness, clippings, drawings, and references to Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious, ventriloquists, and Francis Bacon's tortured figures. He crafted the voice, the mannerisms, the compulsive lip-licking tic to manage the prosthetics. He directed his own hostage videos. He remained in character between takes, unsettling the entire cast. Michael Caine has said he genuinely lost his lines during the penthouse confrontation because Ledger's presence was so unnerving. Ledger's tragic death in January 2008 at age 28 from an accidental overdose still feels like a wound the industry never fully healed. The film is dedicated to him and to stunt coordinator Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor was historic and profoundly earned. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is the film's tragic center, hopeful, charismatic, ultimately shattered. Maggie Gyllenhaal brings Rachel Dawes to life with fire and heartbreak. Gary Oldman's Gordon is quiet, unbreakable integrity. Michael Caine's Alfred is the emotional core. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is steady brilliance. Every actor in the deep bench, Eric Roberts, Chin Han, Richie Coster, Michael Jai White, Colin McFarlane, Monique Gabriella Kernan, Keith Zarabaika, Ron Dean, Joshua Harto, Anthony Michael Hall, Nestor Carbonell, William Fishner, David Dasmalkian, Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow, adds real texture and humanity. Lee Smith's editing is relentless, 152 minutes that never loosen their grip. The 42 Entertainment viral campaign is still legendary. Fake websites, Joker playing cards, hacked messages, pixel-by-pixel reveals. I believe in Harvey Dent campaigns that blurred the line between fiction and reality. July 18, 2008. A cultural detonation. Record $158.4 million opening weekend. Over $1 billion worldwide. Highest grossing film of 2008. 94% Rotten Tomatoes. 84 Metacritic. 2 Oscars. National Film Registry. countless greatest of all time placements. And yet the real power isn't in the numbers. It's in the questions that refuse to leave you. What would you do if someone put a gun to the head of everything you believe in? How far would you go to protect the people you love? What happens when the hero has to become the villain to save the day? The Dark Knight doesn't answer those questions for you. It forces you to answer them for yourself. Imagine that final, lingering silence after the screen cuts to black. The music has stopped, the city lights have faded, but your thoughts are louder than ever. That's the quiet power of The Dark Knight. It doesn't end when the movie ends. It begins its real work in the hours, days, and sometimes years that follow. Even now, on this chilly January morning in 2026, when we've seen every possible variation of caped crusaders and masked madmen, this film refuses to fade into the background. It stands taller, sharper, more necessary than almost anything that came after it. If you're still on the fence about giving it your full attention again, or if you've never truly let it sink in, let me take you through the very last stretch of why The Dark Knight isn't just a movie you watch. It's a movie that watches you back. Christopher Nolan directed this film like a surgeon with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. Every cut is precise. Every pause is loaded. Working once again with his brother Jonathan on the screenplay and carrying forward the story framework he first shaped with David S. Goyer, Nolan created something that feels less like entertainment and more like a moral stress test. The entire story revolves around a single, terrifying premise. Order is not inevitable. It is fragile. It is maintained by people who are willing to suffer for it. And when someone comes along who understands that fragility better than anyone, who delights in exposing it, the only way to fight back is to risk becoming part of the darkness you're trying to stop. Nolan has never hidden his influences. He's spoken openly about Michael Mann's Heat as the blueprint for the long, tense confrontations between opposing forces. He's drawn from the operatic crime family dynamics of The Godfather, and he's pulled the deepest psychological threads from Batman comics, the anarchic philosophy of The Killing Joke, the brutal realism of The Long Halloween, the weary heroism of The Dark Knight Returns. But he never borrows. He transforms. He makes the material feel urgent, contemporary, and painfully human. That $185 million budget was never wasted on empty flash. Every cent went toward grounding the impossible in the real. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with an iron commitment to authenticity. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, gave them the runway to take risks most studios would never allow. Warner Brothers Pictures backed a vision that could have easily been dismissed as too mature, too bleak, too adult for a comic book summer release. What they got instead was a film that redefined what the genre could be. The shoot itself was a logistical miracle wrapped in controlled madness. Chicago surrendered its arteries for months. LaSalle Street, Wacker Drive, Lake Street, Lower Wacker, the old Chicago Main Post Office, the abandoned Brax factory on Cicero. Every location was chosen because it already carried the weight and texture of Gotham. The opening bank heist required weeks of preparation. A real school bus disassembled, rebuilt inside the massive post office behind a false wall, then propelled backward through the brick with a compressed air cannon in one flawless explosive take. The truck flip? Engineers surveyed every underground utility line, mapped every manhole, calculated every angle. One single, real, physics-defying flip that still feels impossible when you watch it. The hospital explosion? A genuine demolition of a condemned building, captured in sweeping IMAX frames that make the flames feel close enough to burn. Hong Kong provided the vertigo of its nighttime towers. England's Pinewood Studios and Cardington Airfield housed the vast interiors. The Bat Bunker, the penthouse, the interrogation room that feels like a pressure cooker even on your TV. The IMAX commitment changed everything. Roughly 28 minutes shot on those enormous 70mm cameras. The bank heist opens in overwhelming scale. The convoy ambush feels like you're riding inside the machine. The Hong Kong sequence makes your stomach lurch with the character. No other director had dared to use the format so aggressively for action. Nolan did, and the industry has been chasing that feeling ever since. Practical effects were non-negotiable. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a real, punishing vehicle. Thousands of pounds, no conventional controls, ridden only by the one stuntman who could handle it at speed, Jean-Pierre Goy. The pencil trick? Live and dangerous. The ferries. Real boats filled with real extras facing a real moral nightmare. CGI was used sparingly, around 650 to 700 shots, almost all invisible refinements. The Batsuit was redesigned with stretch materials and segmented armor, so Christian Bale could actually move, fight, and bleed like a man at the end of his rope. The Joker's makeup was allowed to tell its own story. Fresh prosthetics every day, but never cleaned up. Smears, cracks, sweat, decay, chaos made physical. Heath Ledger would often touch up his own paint, ensuring the scars looked more and more like they were eating the man alive. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now part of the language of cinema. The Joker's two-note motif, simple, ugly, unstoppable, creates instant dread. Dent's theme begins heroic and slowly collapses into dissonance. The music doesn't accompany the story, it becomes the story. Christian Bale gave Batman everything he had left. He trained harder, pushed his voice deeper, performed high-risk stunts himself, including the heart-stopping Willis Tower ledge, because anything less would have been dishonest. Heath Ledger's Joker is still the performance that redefines villainy. 6 weeks of isolation, a private diary of madness, influences from punk icons, ventriloquists, Francis Bacon's distorted horrors. He shaped the voice, the tics, the lip-licking, the chaos. He directed his own videos. He never dropped character. He terrified everyone. His death at 28 in January 2008 remains one of the greatest losses cinema has ever suffered. The film is dedicated to him and to Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Oscar was not just deserved, it was inevitable. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is hope that shatters. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is love caught in the crossfire. Gary Oldman's Gordon is quiet, stubborn decency. Michael Caine's Alfred is the heart that keeps beating. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is calm, unflinching reason. Every single person in the cast, from the mob bosses to the terrified civilians, feels essential. Lee Smith's editing is merciless. 152 minutes of unrelenting pressure. The viral campaign by 42 Entertainment turned marketing into mythology. Fake sites, Joker cards, hacked messages, I believe in Harvey Dent rallies that felt eerily real. July 18, 2008, $158.4 million opening weekend record. Over $1 billion worldwide. Highest grossing film of the year, 94% critical love, 2 Oscars, National Film Registry, timeless status. But the true reason The Dark Knight still matters so deeply is this: it refuses to comfort you. It shows you a hero who sacrifices everything and still loses. A villain who doesn't want to win. He wants to prove that everyone is one bad day away from joining him. A city that can be saved only by lying to itself. And it asks you, quietly, relentlessly, which side are you on? How much darkness are you willing to accept to keep the light burning? Imagine the way the film lingers in your mind long after you've turned off the screen, the way certain lines echo in quiet moments, the way the Joker's laugh can still catch you off guard when you least expect it. That's the rare alchemy of The Dark Knight. It doesn't simply end, it seeps into your thoughts, reshapes your perspective, and quietly demands to be revisited. Even on this ordinary Monday morning in January 2026, when the world has moved on to new heroes, new villains, new spectacles, this film remains untouchable. Not because it's the biggest or the loudest, but because it's the truest. It strips away every layer of fantasy and leaves you staring at something painfully real. The cost of standing between order and chaos, the thin line between savior and destroyer, the terrifying fragility of everything we take for granted. If you've ever wondered why so many people still speak of The Dark Knight with something close to reverence, or if you've let years pass since you last surrendered to its full force, let me carry you through these final, lingering thoughts until the only thing left is the overwhelming need to press play once more. Christopher Nolan approached this film with the mindset of someone who understood that true tension doesn't come from spectacle alone. It comes from moral stakes that feel unbearable. Alongside Jonathan Nolan on the screenplay and carrying forward the foundational story ideas he first explored with David S. Goyer, he built a narrative that operates on multiple levels at once. A gripping crime thriller on the surface, a philosophical meditation underneath, and a deeply personal tragedy at its core. The story is never about defeating a villain in the conventional sense. It's about how far a man will go to preserve the illusion that the world can still be saved, even when every action he takes seems to prove the opposite. Nolan drew from the cold, methodical intensity of Heat, where cops and robbers circle each other like predators in slow motion. from the tragic grandeur of The Godfather, where loyalty and betrayal are currency, and from the bleakest corners of Batman mythology, The Killing Joke's exploration of how one bad day can break anyone, The Long Halloween's slow unraveling of hope. The Dark Knight returns weary portrait of a hero who has already given too much. Yet he never quotes, he reimagines. He makes every influence feel inevitable, as if this story was always waiting to be told this way, in this exact moment. The $185 million budget was wielded like a scalpel, not a hammer. Every resource was poured into making the unreal feel undeniable. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with a shared obsession for physical truth. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, understood that sometimes the greatest risk is to play it safe, and Warner Brothers. Pictures gave them the space to chase something bigger than box office formulas. The result is a film that feels expensive not because of CGI fireworks, but because every location, every stunt, every frame carries the weight of real effort and real danger. Chicago in 2007 was not just a backdrop, it was a collaborator. The city gave itself over completely. Streets sealed off for days, bridges closed, entire districts transformed. The opening bank heist inside the old Chicago Main Post Office remains one of the most audacious sequences ever filmed. Weeks of preparation to dismantle a school bus, reconstruct it behind a false wall, then launch it backward with explosive force in a single, breathtaking take. The truck flip on LaSalle Street? A triumph of engineering and nerve, with every underground utility mapped to avoid catastrophe, one perfect real-world physics-defying moment captured forever. The hospital explosion? A condemned factory wired for genuine demolition, a fireball recorded in sweeping IMAX glory that still makes the air feel hot. Hong Kong's glittering towers provided vertigo. England's vast sound stages gave birth to the Bat Bunker, the penthouse, the interrogation room where every shadow feels like a threat. The choice to shoot substantial portions, around 28 minutes in full 70mm IMAX, wasn't a gimmick. It was a statement. Those giant cameras deliver scale and intimacy at once. The bank heist feels suffocatingly close. The convoy chase feels like you're strapped inside the tumbler. The Hong Kong descent makes your stomach drop. It's the difference between watching action and feeling it in your bones, and Nolan was the first to weaponize that difference so completely. Practical effects were the religion of the production. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a real, brutal, shoulder-steered beast that only one stuntman could tame at speed. The pencil trick? Performed live, with genuine risk. The ferries? Real vessels carrying real extras through a real moral crisis. CGI was kept to the shadows, roughly 650 to 700 shots, nearly all invisible polish. The Batsuit was rebuilt with flexibility and segmented armor, so Christian Bale could move like a man who is always one step away from breaking. The Joker's makeup told its own silent story. Fresh prosthetics every morning, but deliberately allowed to degrade. Sweat, smears, cracks, unraveling. Heath Ledger would often retouch his own scars, ensuring the chaos looked organic, inevitable. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now eternal. The Joker's two-note motif, raw, electronic, corrosive, creates dread like a heartbeat. Dent's theme starts proud and slowly fractures. The music doesn't support the film, it becomes its nervous system. Christian Bale's Batman is exhaustion made flesh. Voice pushed to gravel, body pushed to limits. Stunts performed himself because anything else would have been a lie. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that changed everything. Isolation, a diary of madness, influences from punk, art, broken minds, a voice invented from scratch, videos directed in character, a presence that unsettled everyone. His death at 28 in January 2008 still feels like a theft. The dedication is quiet, devastating. His posthumous Oscar was justice. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is hope that burns out. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is love that refuses to be easy. Gary Oldman's Gordon is decency that endures. Michael Caine's Alfred is the heart that keeps beating when everything else stops. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is reason that never wavers. Every role matters. Lee Smith's editing is relentless. 152 minutes of pure, unyielding tension. The 42 Entertainment viral campaign blurred fiction and reality. Fake sites, Joker cards, hacked messages, election rallies that felt too close to home. The release on July 18, 2008 was seismic. Record opening, $1 billion worldwide, highest grossing of the year, 94% acclaim, 2 Oscars, National Film Registry. But the deepest truth is this: The Dark Knight never lets you escape. It shows you a hero who must lie to save hope, a villain who wants only to prove that hope is a lie, a city that can survive only by choosing ignorance. And it leaves you asking the questions you can't unask. How much darkness can you tolerate to keep the light alive? What are you willing to become to stop someone who wants nothing more than to watch everything burn? Imagine sitting alone in a dimly lit room late at night, the only light coming from the television screen, the city outside completely forgotten as Gotham's skyline fills your vision once more. That's how the Dark Knight finds you again and again, quietly, insistently, like an old friend who knows your secrets and isn't afraid to remind you of them. Years may pass, trends in cinema may shift, new heroes and new threats may dominate the conversation, but this film never loses its grip. It doesn't rely on nostalgia or spectacle alone. It relies on something far more enduring. The uncomfortable truth that heroism isn't a gift, it's a burden, that chaos doesn't always come from monsters but from the cracks in ordinary people, and that the line between saving the world and losing yourself is thinner than we ever want to admit. If you felt the pull of this movie before, but let time dull its edges, or if you've somehow never allowed it to truly reach you, stay with me just a little longer, because what comes next is the final, quiet invitation to return to the shadows where everything that matters actually happens. Christopher Nolan crafted The Dark Knight with the patience and precision of someone who understood that real drama isn't built from noise, but from silence. The silence before a decision, the silence after a betrayal, the silence when hope finally breaks. Together with Jonathan Nolan on the screenplay and drawing from the foundational story ideas he first shaped with David S. Goyer, he constructed a narrative that refuses easy catharsis. The story is never about a clean victory over evil. It's about how the act of fighting evil changes the fighter, how every moral compromise chips away at the soul, how one man's refusal to kill can become the very thing that allows greater destruction to flourish. Nolan has always been clear about his inspirations. The slow-burn procedural dread of Heat, where every move is calculated and every glance carries consequence. The tragic inevitability of the Godfather saga, where power corrupts even the most principled. And the psychological depth of Batman's darkest comic arcs. The Killing Joke's devastating examination of how fragile sanity can be. The Long Halloween's slow poisoning of justice. The Dark Knight Returns' portrait of a hero who has outlived his own legend. Yet Nolan doesn't imitate. He distills. He takes those elements and forges something that feels urgent and alive, as if the story was written not for an audience in 2008, but for every person who would ever face their own version of Gotham's impossible choices. The $185 million budget was never about extravagance. It was about conviction. Conviction that the audience deserved something tangible, something they could believe in. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with an almost religious dedication to the real. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, understood the vision and protected it. Warner Brothers Pictures took the risk of trusting a director who wanted to make a summer blockbuster feel like a Greek tragedy. And the gamble paid off in a film that still feels more substantial, more adult, more honest than most prestige dramas released today. And the physical production was a testament to that commitment. Chicago didn't just serve as a location, it became Gotham's beating heart. Streets were surrendered for weeks, entire blocks of downtown sealed off, traffic rerouted, bridges closed, so that the city's real architecture could stand in for the myth. The opening bank heist inside the vast, echoing old Chicago main post office required weeks of meticulous preparation. A full-sized school bus dismantled piece by piece, rebuilt behind a false brick wall, then propelled backward through the wall with a massive air cannon in one single perfectly timed explosion of dust, debris, and shock. The truck flip on South LaSalle Street? A feat that still defies belief. Structural engineers mapped every underground utility, every pipe, every cable, ensuring the hydraulic ram would only flip the vehicle and not collapse the street beneath it. One take. One real, gravity-defying moment frozen in time. The hospital explosion? A condemned Brax factory wired with hundreds of charges and detonated for real. The fireball captured in sweeping IMAX shots that make the destruction feel immediate and overwhelming. Hong Kong's nighttime towers provided the vertiginous height for one of the most breathtaking sequences ever committed to film. England's Pinewood Studios and the cavernous Cardington hangars gave life to the Bat Bunker, the penthouse, the interrogation room, spaces so detailed and lived in that they feel like real places you could step into. The decision to shoot roughly 28 minutes in full 70mm IMAX remains one of the most audacious creative choices of the 21st century. Those enormous cameras don't merely record action, they immerse you in it. The bank heist opens with a scale that presses against your chest. The convoy chase feels like you're inside the machine. The Hong Kong drop makes your stomach lurch with the character. It is the difference between observing and experiencing, and Nolan understood that difference better than anyone. Practical effects were treated as sacred. Chris Corbold's team constructed the Batpod as a real, punishing, shoulder-steered monster that weighed thousands of pounds and could only be ridden at speed by one trained stuntman. The pencil-through-the-table scene? Performed live, with genuine danger. The ferry dilemma? Real boats carrying real extras through a real ethical abyss. CGI was restrained to around 650 to 700 shots, almost all of them subtle and invisible. The Batsuit was re-engineered with flexible materials and segmented armor plates so Christian Bale could fight, run, and fall like a man who has already given too much. The Joker's makeup evolved with the character. Fresh prosthetics applied every morning, but never repaired, never cleaned. Sweat, smudges, cracks, decay accumulating naturally until the face itself looked like it was coming apart. Heath Ledger would often retouch his own scars between takes, ensuring the chaos looked inevitable and unstoppable. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now part of the collective unconscious. The Joker's two-note motif, harsh, electronic, relentless, creates anxiety before the first word is spoken. Dent's theme begins with heroic brass, then slowly fractures and collapses into dissonance. The music doesn't accompany the story, it becomes the story's heartbeat. Christian Bale's Batman is exhaustion and resolve in human form. Voice pushed to its breaking point, body pushed beyond limits. Stunts performed himself because anything less would have felt like betrayal. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that redefined what a villain could be. 6 weeks of isolation, a private diary filled with madness, clippings, drawings, and references to Johnny Rotten, Sid Vicious ventriloquists and Francis Bacon's screaming figures. A voice invented from nothing, videos directed in character, a presence that unsettled the entire cast. His tragic death at 28 in January 2008 from an accidental overdose remains one of cinema's greatest losses. The film is dedicated to him and to stunt coordinator Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor was not just deserved, it was necessary. Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent is the tragedy of hope that burns out. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is love caught between two impossible men. Gary Oldman's Gordon is quiet, unbreakable decency. Michael Caine's Alfred is the heart that refuses to stop beating. Morgan Freeman's Lucius Fox is calm, unflinching reason. Every single role adds weight, depth, humanity. Lee Smith's editing is merciless. 152 minutes of unrelenting pressure that never loosens. The 42 Entertainment viral campaign blurred the line between fiction and reality. Fake websites, jokerized currency, hacked messages, I believe in Harvey Dent rallies that echoed the real political climate of 2008. The release on July 18, 2008 was a cultural explosion. Record $158.4 million opening weekend, over $1 billion worldwide, highest grossing film of the year, 94% critical acclaim, 2 Oscars, National Film Registry induction in 2020. But the deepest truth is this: The Dark Knight never lets you look away. It shows you a hero who must lie to preserve hope, a villain who wants only to prove that hope is the real delusion, a city that survives only by choosing to believe in a lie. And it asks you the questions you can't unhear. How much are you willing to sacrifice to keep the world from falling apart? What part of yourself would you give up? And if the day ever comes when the rules no longer apply, which side of the line will you stand on? Imagine the way the film refuses to let go even when the night has ended and morning has come. You wake up with certain images still burning behind your eyes, the slow burn of a flare against a dark skyline, the smeared paint on a painted smile, the quiet silhouette of a man in black standing alone on a rooftop as the city lights flicker uncertainly below. The Dark Knight has that rare quality. It doesn't end when the credits finish. It migrates. It takes up residence in the quiet corners of your mind and waits for the right moment to remind you it's still there. When you read a news headline about corruption, when you hear someone talk about how thin the line is between right and wrong, when you feel the weight of a choice you don't want to make. And even today, January 19th, 2026, when the world has moved through so many new stories, so many new attempts to capture the same lightning in a bottle, this film remains the one that struck hardest because it never tried to be perfect. It tried to be true. True to the exhaustion of fighting, true to the seduction of chaos, true to the unbearable cost of holding on to principle when everything around you is screaming to let go. Christopher Nolan approached The Dark Knight with the calm ruthlessness of someone who understands that real power comes from restraint. He and Jonathan Nolan wrote a screenplay that feels like a slow descent. Every scene, every line, every silence pulling you deeper into the question of how far a person can bend before they break. Building on the story foundation he first created with David S. Goyer, Nolan crafted something that is at once intimate and epic, personal and universal. This is not a film interested in easy heroism or cartoonish villainy. It is interested in what happens when the hero is forced to become the thing he has sworn to destroy, when the villain is not driven by greed or revenge, but by a terrifying desire to prove that the entire system, morality, order, hope, is built on the thinnest of illusions. Nolan has always been generous about his influences. He has spoken of Michael Mann's Heat as the model for the long, patient stare-downs between men who are mirrors of each other. He has acknowledged the tragic grandeur of The Godfather, where every choice is a chain that binds tighter. And from the comics, he drew the darkest currents. The Killing Joke's devastating insight into how close every mind is to fracture. The Long Halloween's slow corruption of justice. The Dark Knight Returns' portrait of a hero who has already paid too much. Yet none of these are quoted. They are absorbed. They are transformed. Nolan makes every source feel as though it was always leading to this exact moment, this exact story about a city that can only be saved by being lied to, and a man willing to carry that lie on his back. The $185 million budget was spent with the precision of a surgeon's blade. No waste, no vanity. Every dollar went toward creating a world that felt like it could exist tomorrow. Gritty, lived in, unforgiving. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with the kind of focus that borders on faith. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, protected that faith. Warner Brothers Pictures took the risk of letting a director turn a comic book movie into a moral inquiry, and the result is a film that still feels more real, more adult, more urgent than most serious cinema released in the years since. The production was an act of surrender to the physical world. Chicago in 2007 did not imitate Gotham. It became Gotham. The city council gave up its arteries for weeks at a time. Entire blocks were sealed. Bridges were closed. The opening bank heist inside the old Chicago main post office required weeks of meticulous planning. A real school bus cut in half, rebuilt behind a false brick wall, then blasted backward through the wall with compressed air in one flawless, explosive take that still feels like a physical blow. The truck flip on South LaSalle Street, months of engineering surveys, every underground utility line mapped, one single, real, gravity-defying flip captured in full. The hospital explosion? A condemned Brax factory wired with hundreds of charges and detonated for real. The fireball sweeping across IMAX frames that make the heat feel immediate. Hong Kong's night towers gave vertigo. England's vast hangars gave scale. Every location was chosen because it already carried the weight of reality. The decision to shoot roughly 28 minutes in full 70mm IMAX was not a technical experiment. It was a statement of intent. Those giant cameras do not just record, they immerse. The bank heist feels suffocatingly close. The convoy chase feels like you're inside the machine. The Hong Kong sequence makes your stomach drop with the character. It is the difference between watching action and feeling it in your chest. And Nolan was the first to wield that difference so completely. Practical effects were the unspoken creed. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a real, punishing, shoulder-steered beast that only one stuntman could master at speed. The pencil trick? Live and dangerous. The ferries? Real boats carrying real extras through a real moral crisis. CGI was kept to around 650 to 700 shots, nearly all invisible. The Batsuit was rebuilt with flexible fabrics and segmented armor, so Christian Bale could move like a man who has already given everything and still refuses to stop. The Joker's makeup decayed with the character, fresh prosthetics every morning, but never repaired. Sweat, smears, cracks, unraveling until the face looked like it was being consumed from the inside out. Heath Ledger would often retouch his own scars, making sure the chaos looked like it had always been there, waiting. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now part of the collective memory. The Joker's two-note motif, harsh, electronic, relentless, creates dread before the first word is spoken. Dent's theme begins proud and slowly fractures into dissonance. The music does not support the film. It becomes its pulse. Christian Bale's Batman is exhaustion and resolve made flesh. Voice pushed to gravel, body pushed beyond limits. Stunts performed himself because anything less would have been dishonest. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that changed everything. 6 weeks of isolation, a diary of madness, influences from punk, art, broken minds, a voice invented from nothing, videos directed in character, a presence that unsettled everyone. His death at 28 in January 2008 still feels like a theft from the world. The film is dedicated to him and to Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Oscar was justice. Imagine the slow return to reality after the screen has gone dark, when the room feels smaller somehow, the air thicker, as if Gotham's shadows have followed you home. You might glance at your phone, scroll through the same feeds you always do, but the words and images feel distant, muted, because part of you is still standing on that rooftop with a man in black armor who chose to carry the blame so the city could keep its fragile hope. That is the quiet magic of The Dark Knight. It doesn't shout for your attention, it claims it, then keeps it long after the final note of the score has faded. It turns a simple viewing into something that lingers like smoke, curling around your thoughts in the days that follow, resurfacing whenever you see headlines about broken systems, about people pushed to the edge, about how thin the line really is between civilization and collapse. And even now, on this quiet Monday morning of January 19th, 2026, when the world has raced forward with new myths, new heroes, new ways to sell us stories of good versus evil, this film remains the one that refuses to be surpassed, because it was never interested in being the loudest or the most explosive. It was interested in being the most honest, the most unflinching, the most human. Christopher Nolan directed The Dark Knight with the steady hand of someone who knows that the most powerful moments are born not from chaos, but from the moment before the chaos erupts. He and Jonathan Nolan shaped a screenplay that feels like a slow-burning fuse. Every scene, every exchange, every long pause carefully placed to draw you deeper into the central question. How much of your own soul are you willing to sacrifice so that the world can pretend everything is still okay? Building on the story framework he first developed with David S. Goyer, Nolan created a narrative that is simultaneously intimate and monumental. A character study wrapped inside an action epic, a tragedy disguised as a blockbuster. This is not a film that wants to give you closure or triumph. It wants to leave you unsettled. It wants you to walk away wondering whether the hero really won, or whether winning was ever the point at all. Nolan has always been generous about the sources that fed this vision. The patient, almost meditative intensity of Michael Mann's Heat, where every look between opponents carries the weight of inevitable collision. The tragic inevitability of The Godfather, where power and loyalty twist into chains. The psychological cruelty of The Killing Joke, where one bad day can shatter even the strongest mind. The moral decay of The Long Halloween. The exhausted, defiant heroism of The Dark Knight Returns. Yet he never borrows, he transforms. He takes those elements and forges something that feels both timeless and painfully of its moment. A story about a city that can only be saved by a lie, and a man willing to become the villain in everyone else's story so the light can keep shining for them. The $185 million budget was spent with ruthless clarity. No extravagance for its own sake. Every dollar was invested in making the impossible feel real, in making you believe that the streets of Gotham could be the streets outside your window tomorrow. Charles Roven, Emma Thomas, and Nolan produced with an almost monastic dedication to authenticity. The executive producers, Benjamin Melniker, Michael Uslan, Kevin Delanoy, Thomas Tull, gave them the freedom to chase something rare. Warner Brothers Pictures took the gamble of letting a director turn a comic book movie into a meditation on morality. and the result is a film that still feels more substantial, more adult, more urgent than most prestige dramas released in the nearly 2 decades since. The production was an act of total surrender to the physical world. Chicago in 2007 did not stand in for Gotham. It became Gotham. The city gave up its major arteries for weeks, streets sealed, bridges closed, entire districts reshaped by production lights. The opening bank heist inside the vast, echoing old Chicago main post office required weeks of preparation. A real school bus dismantled piece by piece, rebuilt behind a false brick wall, then launched backward through the wall with a massive air cannon in one single, perfect, explosive take that still makes the heart lurch. The truck flip on South LaSalle Street? Months of engineering calculations, every underground utility line mapped, one real, gravity-defying flip captured forever. The hospital explosion? A condemned Brax candy factory wired with hundreds of charges and detonated for real. The fireballs sweeping across IMAX frames that make the destruction feel close enough to burn. Hong Kong's glittering night towers gave vertigo. England's enormous sound stages gave scale. Every location, every practical set, every stunt was chosen because it carried the texture and weight of lived reality. The decision to shoot approximately 28 minutes in full 70mm IMAX was not a gimmick. It was a declaration. Those giant cameras do not simply record. They immerse, they overwhelm, they make you feel the scale and the danger in your bones. The bank heist opens with suffocating immediacy. The convoy chase feels like you're strapped inside the tumbler. The Hong Kong drop makes your stomach drop with the character. It is the difference between observing and experiencing, and Nolan understood that difference better than anyone. Practical effects were the unspoken religion. Chris Corbold's team built the Batpod as a real, punishing, shoulder-steered monster that weighed thousands of pounds and could only be ridden at speed by one trained stuntman. The pencil trick? Performed live with real risk. The ferries? Real boats carrying real extras through a real ethical nightmare. CGI was restrained to around 650 to 700 shots, almost all invisible refinements. The Batsuit was rebuilt with flexible materials and segmented armor, so Christian Bale could move, fight, and fall like a man who has already given everything and still refuses to quit. The Joker's makeup decayed with the character, fresh prosthetics every morning but never repaired, sweat, smears, cracks, unraveling until the face itself looked like it was being eaten alive. Heath Ledger would often retouch his own scars, ensuring the chaos looked organic, inevitable, unstoppable. Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score is now part of the collective unconscious. The Joker's two-note motif, harsh, electronic, relentless, creates dread before the first word is spoken. Dent's theme begins noble and slowly fractures into something broken. The music does not accompany the film, it becomes its heartbeat. Christian Bale's Batman is exhaustion and resolve made flesh, voice pushed to gravel, body pushed beyond limits, stunts performed himself because anything less would have been a lie. Heath Ledger's Joker is the performance that redefined villainy. 6 weeks of isolation, a diary of madness, influences from punk, art, broken minds, a voice invented from nothing, videos directed in character, a presence that unsettled everyone. His death at 28 in January 2008 remains one of cinema's greatest tragedies. The film is dedicated to him and to Conway Wycliffe. His posthumous Oscar was justice. Imagine the way the film settles into your bones like a memory you didn't know you needed until it arrived. You might go about your day, coffee in hand, traffic noise outside, the small routines that keep life moving. But every so often, a line surfaces unbidden. The Joker's mocking, "Why so serious?" Alfred's quiet warning about some men just wanting to watch the world burn. Gordon's final, heavy decision to let the legend live as a scapegoat. The Dark Knight has that kind of permanence. It doesn't demand your attention forever, but once it has touched you, it never fully releases its hold. It becomes a reference point, a quiet compass for moments when the world feels too chaotic, too compromised, too close to breaking. And even now, deep into this ordinary Monday morning of January 19th, 2026, when new stories flood the screens and new voices try to redefine what a hero can be, this film remains the one that set the standard so high that everything else is still measured against it. Not because it was flawless, but because it was fearless. It dared to show that heroism isn't clean, that evil isn't always loud or obvious, that sometimes the greatest act of courage is to let yourself be misunderstood so others can keep their faith. Christopher Nolan directed The Dark Knight with the calm certainty of someone who knows the most powerful stories are built on what is left unsaid. He and Jonathan Nolan wrote a screenplay that breathes and bleeds, every line measured, every silence loaded, building on the story foundation he first laid with David S. Goyer. This is not a film that wants to dazzle with spectacle or soothe with resolution. It wants to confront. It wants to leave you standing in the ashes of your own assumptions, asking what you would do if the rules that hold society together suddenly stopped applying. Nolan has always been transparent about the rivers that fed this river. Michael Mann's Heat for the slow, inevitable collision of two opposing forces who recognize each other. The tragic weight of The Godfather, where every choice is a betrayal of something sacred. The psychological brutality of The Killing Joke, where one terrible day can fracture even the strongest soul. The moral corrosion of The Long Halloween, the weary, defiant heroism of The Dark Knight Returns. Yet he never imitates. He distills.